everybody. Thank you for tuning in to my channel. Today, we're going to have a very interesting conversation, as today we talk about one of the biggest taboos within the church, pornography. This is one of the biggest topics that a lot of believers are actually struggling with, but no one is willing to take the charge in exposing the dangers within pornography. So this interview is simply part one of many other conversations that we will have with others, and how pornography truly affects many different areas. So come and join me in this amazing interview as we discuss the topic of pornography. Today, guys, I have a very good friend, a new friend, I should say. Her name is Helen, and she is from an amazing organization that you have probably heard of through social media. It's called Exodus Cry. Helen is going to be discussing with us the in and outs of pornography, but all of the things that truly a lot of believers do not want to discuss about. Ms. Helen, I thank you so much for the time and the opportunity that you have made to be able to be part of this interview. But first and foremost, Ms. Helen, I just want to go straight into this. Can you tell us a little bit about your role in Exodus Cry and what exactly is Exodus Cry?
Yeah, sure. And thank you so much for having me on. It was really great to connect with you before, and I'm excited and encouraged and really hopeful about us having this very urgent and critical conversation. My current role at Exodus Cry is the Vice President of Impact. I served as the Director of Outreach for many years, and the main things that our organization does is reach out to women and children in the sex industry wherever sex trafficking exists. We have teams who are doing regular outreach and then connecting them to services, and we also provide trauma-informed therapy for trafficking victims. But we're really looking like the big picture, 10 to 20 years ahead, like what is it going to take to abolish sex trafficking? And for us, that looks like modeling our organization after the abolitionist William Wilberforce, and how from years of campaigning, he saw the transatlantic slave trade overturned through shifting a mindset and changing laws. And so we make films and documentaries and message around the topic of sex trafficking, pornography, the sex industry. And then we're campaigning through activism campaigns and legal reform to improve anti-trafficking legislation, because we know that you can assist 100 victims out of trafficking, but while there's still a high demand, a trafficker can easily find another 100 more vulnerable girls. So what does it take to really pull this industry up by the root? And that is our question and our mission. And we've been around for about coming up to 14 years now. I've been with the organization for almost 10.
And I'm glad that you brought up and explained a little bit about Exodus Cry, because I think many people have already come across with the videos that you guys have made. And I actually came across several videos that all of a sudden I just got drawn to watching the video about pornography, and I just felt compelled to watch it. And so as I was watching it, I was really amazed at the facts about pornography and the effects of pornography, that it's much more than, you know, a stress reliever or, you know, something to, you know, something innocent. I mean, it's much more darker than what the world and media really paints it out for. And I think what really impacted me the most is the neurological, the psychological effect that pornography has. And so after I ended up watching y'all's amazing videos, I immediately just thought about the Christian community. You know, how nowadays, especially in these past 2 years, we've had so many pastors, you know, coming out as far as them dealing with pornography, them having some sort of a adulterous relationship with another woman other than their wife. And so immediately I just felt so burdened to know that there's so many believers out there that are struggling with pornography, and they don't want to speak about it because it's kind of like a taboo. You know, no one in the church wants to talk about it because it's like the forbidden fruit. But in reality, in my opinion, Miss Helen, I feel that pornography does need to be spoken about within the church, because there's hundreds of people that are struggling with that, and they know it's wrong and they want to be free, but they don't know. And then the other concern that I have is that we have an upcoming generation of young kids that are being exposed to pornography and are not being educated even by their pastors, about the holiness of sexuality, that basically social media and pornography is educating everybody what sex should be like within the marriage. And so we're seeing this downfall in our society, that it really opened my eyes to see that the root cause of it all is truly pornography. And my heart truly is for many believers not to feel condemned, but to really see this opportunity as an opportunity to receive information and seek out for help, because truly pornography is not something really good. It's something, I would say that it's really bad. And so with that, Miss Helen, um, do you know the history of pornography? Do you know how that all started? How has pornography evolved throughout history and throughout our society?
Yeah, and just to reiterate and say I fully agree with everything you just said. It's interesting, the world's, or perhaps formerly the world's largest porn site, Pornhub, not too long ago tried to make a comparison of the pornography on their site with nude art from like the Renaissance period and the Impressionist era. And you can go to art galleries and see depictions of nude bodies on the walls. And they actually had pictures from the Louvre in France and compared it to porn on their site. And the Louvre got that whole campaign and article taken down, and they were really angry, saying, no, art is not pornography. And I think there's this kind of attitude that, well, people say prostitution is the oldest profession, and we say actually it's the oldest oppression. And pornography has been around forever, and we're just in a more open, liberated society. But actually, it's only really been a more recent phenomena that pornography has become mainstream. And I'm talking in the last 50 to 70 years. And what we saw in the 1960s, in the sexual revolution, Hugh Hefner, who began Playboy magazine, really took what was from like the back streets to the mainstream. And he introduced this magazine, everyone is familiar with Playboy and the notion of that. But with the introduction of the internet age, pornography became a lot more accessible to family households and individuals through the internet. But what we're talking about now is the smartphone, the access that people have right there in their pocket. And I've heard a statistic recently that 10 years old is the average age that kids are being given smartphones right now. And so the access has never been easier, but the content has never been more hardcore. And so when we're talking about pornography, and some people have never seen pornography, especially in the church, there are still a few people who have never sought it out, especially the older generation. And I just want to make it clear that when we're talking about pornography, we're not talking about 2D images in a magazine. That was where it started, but the progression over the last 70 years has increased. There are hundreds of thousands of pornography websites. Many of them are free, and the content has become much more violent, much more obscure. It's not even comparable to a Playboy magazine. And so the content is much more graphic, is much more violent, depicts much more aggressive and misogynistic acts towards women in particular. But yeah, I'd say that Hugh Hefner, it's interesting because even recently a miniseries came out with some of the women who were in his Playboy mansion, and they talk about the abuse, the coercion, the exploitation that they experienced. And so it's, a few years after his death, but the truth is really coming out about the legacy of Playboy is devastating for how it paved the way for what we now are seeing in pornography.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, me growing up in a Christian home, I was never exposed to pornography. And the reality is it's exactly what you said. I mean, for us, the old school, right? We see it only through magazines, but now it's unbelievable, just with one click away, one link away, and people are automatically into another world of perversion. And the next thing you know, I mean, your whole perspective changes. And so, Miss Helen, what do you say, to those people that they grew up believing that pornography is actually normal and healthy? What do you say to those people that believe that?
Well, I think that there's definitely a real cultural push to present it as normal, as and normal for women and young people as well. Magazines like Teen Vogue constantly pushing this narrative that to be sex positive and be familiar with your body and sexuality, porn is a normal part of healthy sexuality. Some counselors and psychologists even suggest couples use pornography as part of exploring sex within their own marriage. And people just think it's normal, especially for boys and men. It's just a normal part of their sexuality. But more and more studies over the years are showing the psychological, mental, physical harms on the brain and the body of pornography. And so it's something that we're saying is actually a public health crisis, a public health issue. That it's a myth that porn is normal or healthy in any way. It's a myth that it strengthens relationships. The data shows that actually it tears relationships apart. It's a myth that it increases someone's libido or sexuality. The studies show that there's a lot of links to erectile dysfunction in men, and the sexual addiction to pixels and pornography rather than a real human, and the impact on real relationships is devastating. There's a man called Gabe Dean who has he very courageously came out and talked about how after a few years of porn addiction, he had full-on erectile dysfunction and could not have an active sexual relationship with his partner, and had to go on a kind of 2-year physical healing and mental healing from pornography in order for his brain and body to recover. And I think that's rarely talked about. People do not realize this. And so it's a myth that pornography is healthy. And that's just talking about the public health issue. I'm not even talking about the human rights violations and exploitation taking place in the content of the porn itself.
Wow. So now that we're in the topic of the effects, can you explain to us the psychological effects along with any other effects? You already explained the biological, but can you explain the psychological effects that porn has on people?
Yeah, and just to say as well, if anyone is wanting to read more into this more, the documentary that was just mentioned at the beginning of this call, Raised on Porn, is on YouTube, and we have a website, exoduscry.com. Our Protect Children Not Porn campaign has a lot of research and statistics on this. And so some of the psychological impact of porn addiction is on both men and women, boys and girls, is shame, guilt, anxiety, confusion, poor social bonds, sexual anxiety, addictions. You can actually see brain scans comparing someone who has watched pornography in a regular way to someone who never has, and the gray matter and the prefrontal cortex of someone who watches porn regularly is actually smaller. And so there's physical evidence showing the differences in the brain damage that porn causes. And it's, this is something that I just feel like I need to give some statistics even for people who might think, well, how many people are really watching porn? There's a lot, even when we talk to parents, and studies show there's a lot of parents who think their kids aren't watching porn, and then those same kids were interviewed and they were. And so I think there's a real almost disconnect and naivety. The facts are that 62% of 11 to 13-year-olds are watching porn, and their first exposure was unintentional. 69% of boys and 23% of girls seen porn by the age of 13 or younger. The average age of exposure is somewhere between 7 and 11 years old, according to the most recent studies. And 80% of teens want to reenact what they see in porn. And so that's a really, really disturbing aspect to all of this. Not only is it causing some of these mental harms that I listed earlier, but what children and teens are seeing, they want to reenact. And so we interviewed a nurse a few years ago who told us that she seeing a huge increase on peer-on-peer child abuse cases, that a lot of child abuse cases that hospitals are seeing now are not from adults abusing the child, they're from another child or a teen. And pornography is the inspiration for that. And we know that children act out what they see, they copy, and that's how they're learning. And so for pornography to be their sexual education is putting other children at risk as well. And so there's so many aspects to this that make it deeply concerning for everyone involved, I think.
My goodness. So, Miss Helen, along with the effects that it has psychologically, and you already shared biologically, I mean, how is also pornography affecting our society and our families and marriages?
I mean, I think for anyone who's in a relationship and has experienced their partner watching pornography, a lot of divorces are cite pornography use as a contributing factor to divorce. And I know for female friends of mine whose partners have watched porn, the feeling that they have is of that my partner is committing adultery in a way. Psychologically, they are having a sexual experience and choosing to watch another person over their own wife or partner. And that's devastating, and it creates a real like shame, a double life, secrets. And what's especially sad, I think, is for both men and women, most of the time they're exposed to pornography as children. It's the equivalent of the porn industry that's the real predator here, going to elementary schools, injecting kids in the playground with heroin. And this kid is growing up for years, struggling with this addiction, never having a safe place to talk about it, to get the recovery they need. And there's this kind of myth that I think a lot of Christians especially might believe, that once I get married, I'll be able to have a sexual relationship, you know, that's their lifestyle choice, to wait till marriage, and then my porn addiction will go away. But if they have not dealt with the porn issue, it's not so much about sex, but it's psychological, it's emotional, it's about a long-term addiction and how they've built these patterns in their brain of seeking pornography for comfort. And if those are not dealt with, then they will take that pornography addiction into their marriage. And I personally know of divorces that have happened over this issue. And so that is, between the childhood exposure and the effect on relationships and marriage, are two major reasons why the church must be talking about this as an urgent topic.
And I think, Miss Helen, I think, in my opinion, I believe that this is the root cause. I believe one of the root causes, because, I mean, nowadays we're seeing now churches filled with single parents, you know, and I think if we can go and deal with this biggest taboo straight at it, I mean, we can really help a lot of families, and especially the singles, before they get married, seek out the help that they need. And so another question, Ms. Helen, that I have for you is, or actually another comment, you know, one of the things that I was thinking, it's amazing to me, Miss Helen, how our culture, our society, and media, and Hollywood have kind of synthesized us, right, to pornography. And I remember years ago, I came across, when I was maybe 21 years old, I read this book from an author, how she was saying that even women, you know, we have a form of pornography. You know, we know the difference, that women are more emotionally stimulated while the men are visually stimulated. But she brought up how, what are these movies, these love movies, these rom-com movies, these, you know, these, what do you call them? These romantic movies, also in a way is like a pornography for the woman, because it creates a false ideology of what marriage should look like, what a man should be like. And so the reality is that really the enemy is behind all of this. I believe that if we go back to the book of Genesis, you know, God's plan was always for family. God's plan was always for marriage. And the enemy literally came to destroy that with a simple lie. And the enemy is still at it right now. His goal is to destroy families, destroy marriages with lies that people have been believing, lies, you know, that Satan himself has implemented because we've allowed and we haven't learned to filter it through the truth or the lens of the word of God. And now we're seeing this dysfunctionality you know, of marriages and within our society. But with that, Miss Helen, I want to ask a couple more questions. So, is pornography the root cause why sex trafficking has expanded so much? And is pornography the root cause that that pedophilia now has, you know, gotten a really popular name nowadays through social media?
Yeah, two very huge questions that could each be their whole interview topic on their own, I feel. But I really want to just respond to the last comment that you made, because I've heard that many times actually, whether it's romantic movies or romantic novels. And even though I agree to an extent that creating a unhealthy fantasy can make marriage or relationships an idol, and it set very high and unrealistic expectations. Like in a way, pornography sets very unrealistic expectations sexually. The main difference is in books and romantic movies, no one's being raped or exploited. No one's being gangbanged and slapped and choked and hit. And so I think that even equating them and putting them in the same bracket, which I've heard a lot of Christians do over the years when they're talking to me about pornography, I always have to stop and say, like, sex trafficking is not happening of the actors in the romantic movies. So even though, like, I would encourage every female friend of mine to, you know, if they have an addiction to romantic movies, that's probably something that they need to have a little conversation with the Lord about. When we're talking about pornography, and off the record, I'm not encouraging anyone to do this. However, if you have children especially, you need to know what they are exactly 2 clicks away from. And on the Pornhub homepage website, there's no click if you're I'm over 18 button. The videos that are on this website, they don't verify age or consent. That was a huge campaign a couple of years ago called Trafficking Hub that blew up into a global movement. We pointed out that to upload any video, and people don't realize actually that most pornography now is like YouTube. It's homemade videos uploaded. It's not pornography made in a studio where actors are signing it. And even though there's problems in that industry and aspect of the industry too, a lot of porn tube sites are homemade videos uploaded, but they do not verify age or consent, and they or of the people in the videos or the people uploading the videos. They only require an email address. And so that was what the entire campaign blew wide open and exposed of these porn tube sites, that there were underage victims, trafficking victims, rape victims on these websites, begging these websites take down this video, and they were either being ignored or it would be taken down and then re-uploaded because there were download buttons on these websites. So on the distribution side, people need to know that there are real videos of rape and trafficking, even underage victims, mixed in with those who are overage and maybe did sign a consent form. But you could never know the difference. How could even a moderator discern the difference between a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, between someone who's pretending to be raped and someone who really is raped? And so those are some very fundamental questions that people need to realize with watching porn. Like, you do not know the story of exploitation of the person behind the screen. So that's one aspect of how porn and trafficking connect. Another aspect is that even when women are signing consent forms in studio-based pornography sets, often they are 18-year-old girls. They are really naive to what is expected of them in porn, and then very violent, aggressive things take place on set. We've spoken with survivors who were bleeding after surgery and then were told to just clean yourself up and carry on scene 2 in 10 minutes time, and then they had to go and get surgery afterwards. Like the brutal nature of how violent pornography is, and the trauma that women experience, the post-traumatic stress disorder. I've spoken to many women who were in porn who have deep, deep regrets and deep, deep trauma from their time there. In some ways, it's prostitution with a camera in the room. It's not just actors acting this out, like real sex is taking place, but often the porn industry is predatory and grooming and coercing those on set into doing acts that they didn't even agree to beforehand. But the way a lot of people understand the connection between porn and trafficking, that I think is really, really important to highlight, is that behind every sex trafficking victim is a sex buyer. For every one trafficking victim, there's 10 or 20 men per day buying her. So the money that people talk about, you know, sex trafficking is a $100 billion industry per year. And we need to start talking about, where does that money come from? The money comes from men who are buying sex in the sex industry, and they don't check with the trafficker, is this a trafficked girl, or is she willingly here? Is she 16 or 18? Like, sex buyers create demand for the sex industry, period. So there's not one group of men who are buying trafficked victims, one group of men who are buying willing, consenting adults. They create demand, period. And so we did a documentary on sex buyers and interviewed them, and every single one of them had a long history of porn addiction, often exposed to porn as a child. But it was those years of absorbing these fantasies. About 87% of sex buyers actually have a wife or a long-term sexual partner. So what they're buying is a pornography experience, something their wife or partner would never agree to do. Because when they purchase someone's consent, they are the master, this person is the slave. They're purchasing a sex slave experience where they are in control, they have the power, and the dynamic is completely unequal. They have all the power, the agency, and the privilege, and she may have zero, she may have a pimp or trafficker, but even in that situation, she's having to do whatever he wants. And I have worked with one trafficking victim who told me she one time refused a sex buyer a certain act, and he pushed her out the window of a three-story building. And she said, I broke my arm, and after I recovered, I never turned down a sex act from a sex buyer. And so it's pornography that is fueling this fantasy. Men don't wake up one day and decide, oh, I'm gonna go and buy an Asian child in Cambodia for sex. Chances are they've been absorbing Asian-themed teen porn. Pornhub's number 1, 5, and 6 top search terms in 2019 were Asian, Japanese, and Korean. And so when I used to live in Cambodia and work with trafficking survivors there, and one girl who was trafficked age 11 told me that Western men from America, from Europe, from Australia would come and show her porn on the phone and tablet and get her to recreate what she saw. And that was the first time that I made that direct connection of pornography 100% fuels sex trafficking.
So Miss Helen, with the connection with pornography, you know, how is it that pornography is, like you said the word, and I think it's a good word, fueling individuals to go so deep within sexual acts that they're willing now to abuse a child, that they're willing to step into child pornography?
Yeah, and I think everyone understands that children cannot consent to being in pornography. If a child is in porn, it's a form of child sex trafficking, it's a form of abuse. So even the term child pornography, we call it child sexual abuse material. Like, that's literally what it is. We interviewed someone in our film Raised on Porn who described that he watched for years pornography of adults, but the nature of porn is that you want to watch something different, more nefarious, more deviant, something more extreme, more violent, or more edgy. And for him, he began watching barely legal porn of depicting teens, which is a very common type of genre of porn, teen porn, girls in little schoolgirl outfits. And then even younger, like depicting them in pigtails and teddy bears. And he's training his brain to be sexually aroused by pictures of young looking prepubescent girls in sexual acts, which is extremely harmful. And he ended up, the depictions of adults pretending to be underage wasn't enough for him. And he began seeking out pornography of real underage victims. And he ended up going to prison for that, rightly so. But he said on camera, I'm not a pedophile. I'd never been attracted sexually to children. It was pornography and this constant search for something more, another hit, a drug that was a bit more intense than the last hit. And so when we see or read about someone in the news that's been arrested with child sexual abuse material, child pornography, images and videos on their computer, and we're like, oh my gosh, how can these people live in my neighborhood? We need to remember they weren't born this way. A very, very small percentage of people were born or had a sexual attraction to children from a young age. It's socialized through pornography to find underage girls sexually attractive, and that is really harmful.
Miss Helen, and on that topic of children, what has been the youngest age, or nowadays, based upon statistics, what is the youngest age that kids, the youngest age of children that are now being exposed to pornography?
Yeah, we did a questionnaire on Instagram and had several hundred people respond, telling us their story of when they were first exposed to porn. And we had many who had been 6, 7, 8 years old when they were first exposed to porn. But I actually had a conversation recently with a trafficking survivor, and they told me that they were in the hair salon recently, and a toddler, they said they looked about 2 or 3 years old, had their mum's phone, and she was like, I don't know whether she clicked on something wrong or whether the mum had been watching porn on another tab or how it happened, but she suddenly looked down and was like, I could hear noises of like, very sexually explicit noises. And I looked down and I saw on the screen hardcore porn that this 2 or 3 year old kid was just watching. And she was looking around like, is no one going to stop? Like, she didn't even know who the mother was. And she was so disturbed. She was like, this little kid was just watching porn. She doesn't understand it, but psychologically, there's beginning to have an impact. And a lot of times kids, when they're first exposed to porn, and there's a very disturbing statistic from one study that said from underage consumers of pornography, 22% are 10 or under. And in addition to that, they said that 36% of underage consumers were 10 to 14 year olds. So we're seeing like literally every year, the first time exposure, or the average age, is getting younger and younger, with kids having access to smartphones, and a lot of parents not realizing the proper filters on that. I spoke to one mom who, her 8-year-old son, they were at Thanksgiving dinner and he was playing on her phone in the corner for like 45 minutes. And when they left the Thanksgiving dinner, she said he got in the car and he just didn't seem himself. He seemed really heavy and he just had a really kind of shocked and traumatized look on his face. And she was like, I need to check what game was he playing? What was he looking at? And she went on her history and was devastated that he'd been on Google typing in different funny words and had somehow stumbled onto Pornhub. And for the last 45 minutes, video on loop after loop after loop of like, she went through and watched the videos that her 8-year-old son had watched because she was so devastated that this had happened. They hadn't even had the sex talk with him yet. And she said it was violent gangbang group rape videos involving like body parts, things that she was just so devastated that her son had seen this, and he clearly seemed a bit troubled and confused. And her and her husband had to sit down with him and talk to him. But she thought she had porn filters on her phone. She said on their laptops and computers, they downloaded all the software, but she hadn't realized that on her phone, it hadn't properly been protected. And we're hearing stories like that often.
Oh my gosh. And before we hit on the topic of, parents guarding children, Miss Helen, does pornography, when these children are exposed to pornography, does it actually affect their, their development, their body, does it affect the children, and how does it affect them?
Yeah, well, I think it's such a harmful idea that this would be their sex education, like to learn about what sex is, learning through Pornhub. Ironically, Pornhub actually have a whole sex education part of their website. So they're preying upon children. They even had a Twitter meme a couple of years ago that had a picture of baby Yoda with the Pornhub reflection in his eyes, and it said 10 minutes after my parents leave the room, implying even baby Yoda is on Pornhub. Like, you're okay with babies watching Pornhub? And I watched a documentary recently with this 13-year-old boy on camera saying, I'm 13 years old and I'm in recovery for porn addiction. And because it lights up and stimulates parts of their brain, that they're literally becoming addicted to the material even before they understand it. Like, it's visual, it's graphic, and so it can become very addictive. And there's studies showing correlations between boys seeing girls as sex objects, boys having a more relaxed stance towards rape from long-term exposure to porn, because they're seeing men be aggressively violent towards women and thinking that this is normal. And then, like the statistic I mentioned earlier, 80% are wanting to act out what they're seeing. And so there's cases of incest, of older brothers acting this out on their sisters. All the time we're hearing stories like this in the news, or from studies and stories that people send to us. And it's the effects on girls are a little bit different to boys. There's some similarity and overlap, but with girls, a lot of the reason that they seek out porn, if it's not an accidental exposure, is curiosity. They want to see, well, I know boys are watching porn, I want to see what they're watching, or I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing and make my boyfriend happy. And so they're learning about what sex looks like from porn, but they're also comparing their body types to these very unrealistic plastic surgery enhanced bodies. And it's giving them body insecurity, anxiety. There's been a huge increase of plastic surgery, of genitalia for women, that is very likely coming from pornography, and this pressure to conform to this seemingly perfect image seen in pornography. There's really tragic studies showing that for girls who watch porn for in a long-term way, they are internalizing these images of men being violent towards women and thinking that's normal. And so for them, what should be red flags and alarm clocks going off, alarm bells going off if they're in a situation of being sexually assaulted, that's often not happening. They think this is normal because it's what they've seen in porn. In our film Raised on Porn, we have an interview with a girl who talks about her first boyfriend when she's 16, and his whole sex education had been in pornography. And so he thought that it was completely normal to ask his girlfriend to do this one sex act that involved punching her in the face and ejaculating on her face, and told her that he wanted to do this with her and that it would be a surprise. And he assumed that she would really like this because in the porn he'd seen, this is what the girl really was shown to really like. Like, how disturbing is that notion that sexual violence is being normalized through pornography? Like, so disturbing. But girls are increasingly every year, tragically, there's an increase of girls watching pornography. Pornhub statistics a couple of years ago showed that 3 in 10 visits to their website are from women. And yeah, the types of pornography that women are seeking out are often really violent, and that's very tragic to me, very disturbing, but the reality that we're in right now.
And I think, Miss Helen, I believe that Hollywood has a very sneaky way to kind of make pornography and, like you said, abuse and rape to look kind of normal. Like, one of the movies that came up a couple recently was 50 Shades of Grey, and they hyped up that movie so much, making it as if this is the ideal sexuality, when really, when you look throughout the movie, it's nothing but abuse. It's nothing but, torturing the woman and kind of seeing the woman as she is some form of a property instead of an individual that has feelings and emotions as well. But it's very scary, Miss Helen, to see how truly pornography is truly a poison within our society, and it really needs to be discussed. I have another question for you. And so, in regards to everything that is going on, are there laws in regards to pornography? Are there laws that are helping to prevent this from continuing on? And what are organizations like you guys? Are you guys involved also in the governmental judicial side to bring an end to pornography?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that we're often asked about, like, how do we ban pornography? And we have to try and explain to folks who ask us that um, in America, there's so many around free speech and the ability to make a video of yourself having sex with someone else and put that video on the internet or sell that in this free market. And to completely ban all pornography would cause a real, would probably be virtually impossible in the current era that we're in. We're not North Korea. There's not censorship. I mean, America's actually pretty bad when it comes to other countries. America, I believe, is one of only 20 nations that allows you to depict 18-year-olds as underage children, like I mentioned, with the pigtails and teddy bears. A lot of countries, that's actually illegal to do. But our approach with this is like the big tobacco campaigns. So through education, showing the harms of cancer, how cigarette smoking, how it affects the heart, the lungs, all those pictures that we remember seeing of cigarettes with the, all the fat coming out, and pictures of what it does to your lungs, and even the secondhand smoking of, like, it's not just about you and your smoking habit. The secondhand smoke can harm children around you. And so through awareness campaigns and then laws that bring some regulation to big tobacco, you have to give warnings, you can't smoke inside, like regulations to manage this industry. It's really shifted the entire landscape of smoking. And I remember growing up and seeing people smoking all the time, and you could smoke inside restaurants, and it just every day seeing people smoke. Whereas nowadays it's a completely different situation. So when we wouldn't say we want people who smoke to be criminalized, but we want them to be aware of the effects of, if you choose to smoke, this is the effect it could have on your body, on other people around you who you care about. And big tobacco needs to be heavily regulated, not from the inside out, but from the outside in. And pornography right now is very much self-regulated. They don't have a lot of outside accountability. And so we think there's a lot of minimum regulations that need to be brought in. It's kind of currently a bit like the Wild Wild West, which is what we saw on Pornhub, where all you needed was an email address and you could upload a video of an underage trafficking victim. That is not proper regulation. And so we are wanting to make it mandatory for every porn site to require age verification before entering. We're saying if you have to show government ID to buy tobacco and alcohol, then you should have to enter a government ID to access a porn site. And that the porn site wouldn't be keeping that data. It would be a third-party encrypted app, like when you put your credit card information in, the website's not legally allowed to keep that. We're very trusting of doing that. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to put my government ID in a porn site. But the alternative is that kids every day are accessing these sites. So we created a petition and a campaign called Protect Children, Not Porn. And we are, in a few months, presenting that petition to Congress, doing a screening of the film, presenting recommendations of, there are a lot of policies around pornography that need to be discussed. We have another film coming out this summer called Beyond Fantasy. And we're saying, should 18-year-old girls fresh out of high school go into the porn industry? They're not even allowed to legally drink for 3 years. Their brains haven't fully developed. It's the most high risk, dangerous violent industry. We think that age of 18 should be raised to 21. So we're just considering what are some regulations that can protect people in porn, and in the meantime raise awareness of the harms of this, and that it, and protect children from accessing it in the meantime. That seems to be a no-brainer, and I'm so horrified that most porn sites don't even have the click if I am over 18, you're just straight onto the site. And even the I am over 18 button, that is totally not adequate. Even any 12-year-old can click on that.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that you guys are going to be presenting that to Congress, because I think that is truly a big open door to be able to start pushing this agenda, because it needs to be addressed, and something needs to happen. And so in regards to children and parents, I know that nowadays every child knows how to handle a smartphone, an iPad. And so I know that it's really difficult sometimes for parents to really be right there next to them and monitor what the kids are watching. But what are some things or apps or practicalities that parents can do to make sure that their children don't come across any pornography or porn sites?
Yeah, great question. And on our Access Cry website, we have this whole section of like filters, top filters we'd recommend for parents to use on their devices, and books we recommend for parents to use as a springboard to having these conversations, which we know can be hard. An organization called Minds released a couple of books called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and they are a helpful springboard. There's several other books and resources out there. There's an organization called Culture Reframed. They have a lot of education for parents. But if you want to browse through our website, we've literally categorized it as the best programs for those struggling with addiction, for spouses, filters, for parents, for schools, all of that in one place. I think a lot of parents, you know, on our social media, sometimes I see comments of parents like, this is why I'm going to homeschool my kids, and this is why I'm never going to let my kid have a smartphone. And I think, even though I totally understand that natural mama bear or papa bear protective reaction towards their children, the reality is it's not if your child will see porn, it's when they'll see porn. And the best way for you to protect your child, as well as putting on the filters, is actually, you could be doing everything right, protecting your child in every way, but all it takes is for them to talk to their kid, their friend or their neighbor who has a smartphone to show them. Billie Eilish, who's a famous pop star, she was homeschooled, and she talks about being exposed to porn, I think at age 11 or 12, and how damaging that was for her teen years. She's spoken out publicly against porn in a really incredible, brave way. But I think parents, if you go into with that mindset of, I want my child to know what pornography is, feel emotionally prepared and equipped to say no, like the peer pressure to watch what your friend might show you. If the child is like, oh, that's pornography, I already know what that is because my mom sat down and told me, and what I have to do in this situation is to say, actually, it's okay, I'm not into that, I don't want to watch that. I know that my parents were really intentional with using books and sitting down with me about certain situations that really did give me the courage to withstand peer pressure in all sorts of ways. And so I really, even though it can be awkward and hard, you are possibly saving your child's life by having these conversations with them. And this is about, you know, everything from stranger danger to boundaries with adults to people showing you pornography. And if the child has had that information from the parents first, they are much better equipped to know how to deal with it, and they'll feel respected and educated and even really cared for, I think, by being prepared and not finding themselves in a situation of being exposed and they have no idea what they're seeing and how to handle the situation. So yeah, check out the website because it really does have all the resources there.
I think that's some great advice. And I now want to go into the topic about the church, you know, because I'm highly involved in ministry and, you know, working with young adults, teens, and even adults. And it's really mind-boggling how many, you know, are being more open, at least with me they are, but you know, the more people I meet, I'm recognizing, my goodness, you know, a lot of people are really bound to pornography, are bound to all of the things that pornography instills. So why do you think, Miss Helen, that pornography is not being fully discussed within the church the way that it should be? Like any other sin, why do you think pornography is not being discussed within the pulpits?
Well, I think it's a word that you mentioned earlier, like taboo. There's a lot of taboo and shame around this. I think for pastors, they either don't want their congregation to think that they have ever been exposed, and so they're wanting to kind of maintain their own pious image, or there's shame because they have been, but they don't want their congregation to know that, or it's just awkward, or they feel uneducated and they don't know where to start, or they're disconnected from the urgent reality of how children are so frequently exposed. or perhaps the pastor has never seen porn and they don't know what the content is and how accessible it is right now. But even though I'd want to think that's true, the statistics of porn use in the church is actually 68% of church-going men view porn on a regular basis. And out of a study of 18 to 24-year-olds in church, 76% of them out porn on a regular basis. And most in both categories had been exposed as children. So I have deep, deep compassion for people who watch porn if they were exposed as children, because I know that, like that analogy I used earlier of like the heroin stuck in their arm as a kid. And a lot of people don't understand the nature of addiction. I think it's categorized often in the churches, it's a sin issue, and you just need to bring it before the Lord in the altar and ask him to break those chains and deliver you. And people do, but then they go home and mess up again, and they're like, why isn't God delivering me of this? And we need to understand it in terms of addiction and long-term ramifications and effects on the brain. So what we've released, or we're in the process of releasing, you can pre-order it on our website, or if you go to raisedonporn.com, you can see the film and pre-order the book. My boss, Benji Nolo, has written a book all about pornography, how to understand it from a critical perspective, the industry, and how to effectively go on the recovery journey. He spent years researching all the studies on pornography, everything that had been written under the planet on porn, and has written this book. And so this is a resource we really want to see embraced by the church, and we're going to be putting it together as like a whole curriculum for parents, for youth leaders, for the church. I had a couple of pastors in England who pornography had been a struggle in their past, and they were very vocal about it. And I was always, encouraged that they would mention it. I think generally people actually have a lot of respect when pastors can be vulnerable or can talk about this, but it's not just enough to like mention it in a sermon or use it as an example of a sin. I really think churches need to actually say, okay, if up to over 60% of men in our church are viewing this is a critical issue, and we need to actually get in some recovery resources and put together men's accountability groups and resources for the spouses who are having to deal with this as well, and treat it as a much more urgent issue than it is. And I just would want to say to any pastor, even if it's not a current addiction for you, think about your own flock. It's probably a current addiction for many, both children, adolescents, single and married, across the board. And you as a pastor, the most caring thing you can do is really, in an effective way, talk about this issue. And it's one of the most critical issues. I've seen people completely lose their faith because they returned to a porn addiction and they were like, I don't want to deal with feeling guilty every day. I'd rather continue watching porn. And that was like the main reason that they stopped going to church and eventually completely turned their back on their faith. Because how can you truly be watching this violent content on a regular basis and have in the same space that sacred place, the Holy of Holies? I just feel like the Holy Spirit is being robbed by these idols of perversion and violence, and possibly real rape and trafficking, because it's all mixed in on these websites. And I feel like my heart for the church is that there's a real sobering wake-up call and almost a grief and a repentance of how have we let this into our church? How have we let this into our eyes? We need to come before the Lord with sackcloth and weeping and repentance, and then say, not for my household, not for my children, not for my brothers and sisters, and learn about pornography addiction, whether you have an addiction or not, whether you've been exposed or not. This is something that everyone needs to be equipped with. And even knowing of all the facets that I've mentioned on this podcast, we need to be educated and not just say, oh, well, porn is a sin, getting drunk is a sin, lying is a sin. That's a really shallow and unhelpful way to categorize it. And we need to unpack it in order to really, really recover fully from it.
Wow. And with that, Miss Helen, have you seen, in these years that you've been working in this amazing organization, have you been able to witness men and women coming out of this porn addiction and being free and having strong marriages? Can you share maybe a couple of testimonies for those that feel that, hey, they don't have a way out? This is way too hard for them. Can you share some hopeful stories that there is a way out? There is hope for them.
Absolutely. And there's been a couple of guys on my outreach team who do outreach regularly to, with me on the streets, people in the sex industry. I have a rule that you have to be completely porn free for at least 1.5 to 2 years before you can join the team. It's like you've got to win the battle against sexual immorality in your heart before you then go out onto the mission field with this. And one of them actually even wrote a book about it called Jesus is Better Than Porn. And several guys I know have walked free and have journeyed out of porn addiction. I remember one saying to me, I used to be part of the problem, and now it's my honor that I get to be part of the solution. And they have a real heart for other men, but also women who are exploited in the sex industry as well. I know women who've had long-term porn addiction. One of my friends just founded a group called Freedom Hub International after she courageously shared her story of long-term porn addiction. And now she helps women through like online coaching and seminars walk free from porn addiction. It's been really, really successful. Even just after a few sessions of like getting to the root core issues. And then like every person almost needs an individual recovery plan for this, because it's different for every person. But I fully believe in the power of God to set people free. But I also believe like it's, I know of non-Christians, someone like Russell Brand, the famous celebrity, and he has a podcast now, I think. He used to be a stand-up comedian in England. He famously talked about having researched the harms of pornography and said, well, I'm going to try and cut porn out for a season in my life. I don't know if I can do it long term, but it seems like it really messes with your brain. And then years on, he said, I walked away from porn completely after doing the research. So that gives me a lot of hope, even beyond the walls of the church. Like, if society at large can understand the harms of pornography, not only of the people in the industry and in the videos they're watching, the real abuse taking place, but the harms on their brain and their body, that they can make the choice to go free and cut it out, like a drug addict who goes on that recovery journey. And I feel really hopeful about that. But it has to start with a culture that's more willing to talk about it and being open. And so I mentioned earlier Billie Eilish speaking out about it. When I see famous people, whether that's in the church or outside the church, begin to address it, I feel encouraged and excited. And I think even in the last 2 years, partly with our Trafficking Hub campaign and everything that happened with Pornhub, it's been in the news a lot more. And the UK is currently passing online safety bill, so requiring porn sites to have age verification. And Canada, France, Australia, Germany, other nations are seriously looking at this as well. And so the pendulum really is swinging. I feel confident, and I know of people in really healthy marriages that one partner or both had a history of porn addiction, but they've done the hard work, they've walked through recovery, and now they're thriving. So that be an encouragement to anyone who's currently in that situation. If you're just dating someone right now and they've disclosed to you that they have a pornography addiction, I would always encourage you to not take it to the next step of engagement or marriage while there's still a current porn addiction. That person needs to take a step back, go on their own recovery journey, and unbrainwash themselves from all the material that they've been consuming about sex and women, and really do the hard work of recovery before you should move forward in the relationship. But that's just my perspective on that.
I agree with you 100% on that, because truly you want to step into a marriage completely free with nothing that will try to destroy the marriage. I know you have mentioned previously a couple of products and things that you guys offer to help those that are bound to pornography, but I just want you to emphasize that a little bit more. For those that are wanting a way out and be free from porn addiction, what can people do and where can they look to get help?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think there's several things. It's not just one, and for different people, different types of program help them. I'd say for sure everyone should go to raisedonporn.com and watch our film and pre-order the book, because that book is a really, really incredible resource when it comes out this year. And then on the resource page of our website, we highlight several different programs of people that we know or it's been personally recommended to us, some that are exclusively faith-based, some that are more general, more scientific in nature. You could sign up to one or two or three of them if you're wanting to make that journey for recovery. There's one program called Fortify that we've heard really good results from, but there's literally a list of about 7 or 8 that we know people have had a lot of success with. So just encourage you to look on that, visit their websites, read through their approach and see which is the best fit for you. But take this really seriously. Like it absolutely should be a top priority in your life. Even if you feel like you've managed to go a while with this addiction and you've kind of compartmentalized your life, it's urgent and it will wreak havoc in your life. It's extremely harmful. I remember speaking at a church a couple of years ago, and this 16-year-old boy came up to me afterwards and he said, since I became addicted to porn, it's all I can think about. I have to step out of every class throughout school to watch porn in the bathroom. And he was like shaking as he was telling me this. And he was like, porn is ruining my life. I've tried so hard to get rid of this addiction. I don't know what to do. Like, help me. And this cry for help, I just like hugged him, thinking like, this porn industry that is predatory, that stole his innocence and got him hooked to something that his brain isn't, developed enough to get free from. He needs outside help and outside sources. He can't do it alone. And so we always really encourage people to like tell someone else as the first step before you even, enter any of these programs. Tell someone that you're struggling with this or that you're going through this. Have them be praying for you and invite God into the process, invite a trusted person into the process, and sign up to fight war against this. And freedom is 100% possible. Healing is 100% possible.
That's amazing. That's amazing and very hopeful. Ms. Helen, with everything that we've discussed, is there anything else that you like to share, with the audience that you feel is important for them to know that maybe I did not discuss or ask?
I mean, I feel like you asked a lot of great questions. No, I can't actually think of anything.
Okay, and with that, Ms. Helen, so for those that are going to come across y'all's amazing organization, and we just want to bless the organization financially so that you guys can continue to do what you guys are doing, where can we go to be able to financially bless you guys?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And we're a faith-based organization. We don't get any government funding. We're funded 100% by private individuals and churches and people who really want to support our mission. And whether it's just going to exoduscry.com or if you follow us on Instagram, our handle is @exoduscry, and then the donate link is easily accessible from there. That any donation would be most welcome. I think that there's something powerful. When I first found out about human trafficking, I signed up to donate $15 a month to this cause as a student. And there is something about just even like putting a few dollars, you're connecting your heart in an intentional way with something, saying like, I'm sowing into this mission, I'm connecting my heart to this mission, I believe in it. And it even like just reminds you to pray for it as well. And so please pray for us. We're definitely on the front line fighting this. We know that things are getting stirred up. The enemy isn't happy. Our team is amazing. There's a lot of just really mature people in the Lord on our team. I'm very grateful that we do this not alone, but please be praying for us and that God would anoint our mission, and that there would be a shift in our culture when it comes to trafficking, pornography, and in the church. Pray for the body of Christ in this country and worldwide to have the courage to start talking about this for the sake of its members getting free.
I absolutely agree with that, Miss Helen. And with that, would you mind praying for our audience, especially for those that, they've probably already finished watching this whole video and they're saying, you know what, I need to seek out help. Or maybe there's, a teenager that is really afraid, to come clean and open up about this issue. Would you be okay in praying for our audience?
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you so much, Ms. Keeler. God, we just thank you that you are the ultimate deliverer and bringer of freedom. Jesus, that in your first public sermon at the synagogue in Luke 4, you quoted that passage from Isaiah 61, that you came to bring good news, to bind up the brokenhearted, to bring liberty to captives and freedom for those bound in darkness. And so right now, Lord, I just pray for everyone listening. If there is anyone who is currently struggling with this addiction and bondage, I ask, Lord, that you would give them courage right now to tell someone, even if they've never told anyone before, that they would have the courage to bring this into the light, that there would be a war in their heart right now to say no more. I'm not going to allow this addiction to take hold and control my life any longer. Lord, I ask that they would feel the tenderness of your heart towards them, your compassion that you saw the very moment when they were first exposed. You saw, you were there at that time, in that moment, and you've seen it all. You know it all. You know us completely. You know how many hairs are on our head. And your heart towards your children is to bring freedom and deliverance, and for them to be voices and messengers of that freedom, then to their village, then to their community, and to others in their life who are struggling. God, we just collectively ask right now that there would be a major awakening in the church of the severity and urgency of this issue, that pastors and parents and youth workers would wake up to the real risks and dangers of their kids and how easily exposed to porn they are, and that there would be just courage among parents to be able to have these conversations with their children, even if their parents never did. Lord, that they would not try and skirt around awkward conversations, but they would dive head in and really seek you as to how to teach their kids about sexuality, not in a legalistic or lording it over them way, but in a frank and open and honest and vulnerable space. That their children would feel safe to ask any questions, and that parents would have a vision for this kind of parenting. Lord, I just ask for all the programs right now that are working to bring deliverance to those in these programs. We ask for your spirit to anoint them, that there would be so many testimonies of those who get free from porn, and that we would in our lifetime see policies passed that protect children, and that bring about regulation to this industry that is the wild, wild west, that is so unchecked and has just so much exploitation and devastating tragedy taking place in it. I pray that you would raise up those with a Moses calling for freedom and deliverance, that cry of let my people go, that they would take on that role of intercessor for their families, for their children, for those in their communities. And that just, you would be connecting the hearts of your people to this issue. I pray even right now that there'd be people listening who feel that boldness and courage. I'm going to speak about this in my small group. I'm going to speak about this to my family at the dinner table. Did you know that trafficking and pornography are connected? That we would start talking about the real exploitation in this industry, and that people would seek out the resources available to help them on their journey to freedom. But they would know that they're doing it holding your hand. And I thank you for one such as Keeler, who have this heart for this issue, who have a heart for the church. And just like she's connected with our organization, we ask that churches would seek out organizations who are talking about this, and that there would be just, a holy connection. And those such as Moral Revolution, and other groups who have resources would be connected with the body of Christ, God. We just ask all these things in your name with boldness, with expectation, with hope that you can and you will do it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Miss Helen, that was a powerful prayer. Miss Helen, I just want to say thank you so much for all the amazing information that you shared with us. I mean, I think I gained even more information from what you guys already, portray there through your videos, because truly this is something that the church needs to talk about so that more and more people can be free. And like you said, so that this sex trafficking industry can start to dismantle as we hit the root issue, which is porn. So Miss Helen, I say thank you. And I say thank you to Exodus Cry and everyone that is involved in this organization. I pray blessings over you, that God will continue to open up doors for you guys, and that everything that the Holy Spirit will drop in you guys to do, may He fulfill it and empower you guys to truly continue to impact and influence our culture, our society, our world. And I pray that when you guys present this to Congress and to Senate, may the doors open up where these politicians will listen and take this seriously, so that we can truly change our culture, bringing in the light into the darkness and allowing the darkness to flee. And for those that have been watching, thank you so much for tuning in. I pray that this conversation has really opened up your eyes, but has also compelled you to go seek out for help. Let me tell you, there is hope in Jesus. There is help out there, that God has truly equipped many, many amazing counselors and leaders to be able to help you come out of this. There is hope for you. And so I pray that after this video, you go out and seek out the help, and most importantly, that you come clean with your spouses, with pastors, with mentors, and ask them to be praying with you as you walk out of this bondage and into freedom. So thank you again for tuning in. And Miss Helen, thank you again for your time. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me, Miss Keeler. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Miss Helen. Bye-bye.